Look around your room. Your phone, your shoes, half your gadgets. Odds are, a huge chunk of it says, Made in China. Today, China is the world's factory and its second biggest economy, snapping at America's heels. But rewind 200 years, and this same country was being carved up by foreigners and mocked as the sick man of Asia. This is the story of the greatest comeback in modern history. How did the Middle Kingdom fall so far and then claw its way back to the center of the world? For over 2,000 years, China was an empire. The Chinese called it Zhongguo, the Middle Kingdom, the center of everything under heaven. It gave the world paper, printing, and gunpowder. For centuries, it was richer than anywhere else on earth. By the 1800s, the Qing emperors ruled a third of all humanity and claimed a divine right to rule all under heaven. China didn't think it needed the outside world. That confidence was about to become a deadly weakness. The trouble started with a drug. British traders were smuggling opium from India into China, and millions got hooked. When China burned the drug, Britain sent warships. China's old wooden navy didn't stand a chance. The loser had to sign the first unequal treaty, handing over Hong Kong and opening its ports by force. Then came a second Opium War, and Russia grabbed land in the north. Everyone wanted a peace. Inside, a civil war called the Taiping Rebellion killed up to 40 million people, one of the bloodiest conflicts in history. In 1895, even Japan, long seen as the little brother, crushed China's fleet and seized territory. The West sneered and called China the sick man of Asia. This whole stretch is remembered as the Century of Humiliation. In 1900, a group called the Boxers rose up to throw the foreigners out. Their slogan, "Support the Qing, destroy the foreigner." 8 foreign armies marched on Beijing, crushed the Boxers, looted the city, and forced China to pay a crushing fine. A doctor named Sun Yat-sen decided the whole empire had to go. Only a revolution could save China. In 1911, an accidental bomb blast sparked a mutiny, and province after province broke away. In 1912, the last emperor, a 6-year-old boy named Puyi, gave up the throne. 2,000 years of imperial rule were over. China became a republic. But the general who grabbed power, Yuan Shikai, just wanted to be emperor himself. When he died, China shattered into pieces, ruled by warlords with private armies. Young Chinese were furious and hungry for new ideas. In 1919, students flooded Tiananmen Square, demanding Mr. Democracy and Mr. Science. Some looked to the West. Others looked to the Russian Revolution and turned to communism. In 1921, 13 men met in secret in Shanghai and founded the Chinese Communist Party. One of them was Mao Zedong. The other big force was the Nationalists, the Kuomintang, led after Sun's death by a steely general, Chiang Kai-shek. At first, the two parties teamed up to crush the warlords and unite the country. Then, in 1927, Chiang turned on his communist allies and slaughtered them in the streets of Shanghai. So began a brutal civil war. Chiang's huge armies tried again and again to wipe the communists out. Cornered in 1934, the survivors fled on an epic 6,000-mile retreat called the Long March. Fewer than 1 in 10 made it, but the man who came out as their leader was Mao Zedong. The Long March became the party's founding legend and Mao's road to the top. Then, a far bigger enemy struck. In 1937, Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China. The Japanese army stormed the capital Nanjing and massacred tens of thousands of civilians in 6 weeks of horror. Up to 20 million Chinese would die, second only to the Soviet Union in all of World War II. Nationalists and communists called an uneasy truce to fight the invaders side by side. China pinned down nearly 1 million Japanese troops and became one of the 4 great Allied powers. When Japan surrendered in 1945, the common enemy was gone, and the old rivals turned back on each other. "The sky cannot have 2 suns," Chiang said. The Civil War roared back to life. This time, the communists won the countryside by promising peasants land. The nationalists, corrupt and broke, fell apart. On October 1, 1949, Mao stood above Tiananmen Square and declared the People's Republic of China. Chiang fled to the island of Taiwan with 2 million followers, a split that still shapes the world today. Mao set out to remake China from scratch. Landlords were dragged out and executed, their land handed to 300 million peasants. Then he gambled. The Great Leap Forward was meant to industrialize China almost overnight. Peasants were herded into giant communes and ordered to smelt steel in backyard furnaces. The steel was useless. Officials lied about the harvests, grain was seized for the cities, and the countryside began to starve. The result was the worst famine in human history, an estimated 45 million dead. Humiliated, Mao stepped back, while more practical leaders quietly cleaned up the mess. China split bitterly with the Soviet Union, then built its own atomic bomb in 1964 and joined the nuclear club. But Mao was not finished. In 1966, he unleashed the Cultural Revolution to crush his rivals. Teenage Red Guards waved his little red book and attacked teachers, officials, and anything they called old. Millions were beaten, humiliated, or killed, and priceless culture was smashed. The country tore itself apart. When Mao died in 1976, China was exhausted, traumatized, and dirt poor. The average peasant earned $40 a year. Then came the man who changed everything, a tiny, twice-purged survivor named Deng Xiaoping. Deng's philosophy was simple. It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice. He cracked China open to foreign money and new ideas, calling it socialism with Chinese characteristics. He built special economic zones, like Shenzhen, a sleepy fishing town next to Hong Kong, with low taxes to pull in factories. Foreign money, factories, and jobs came flooding in. Shenzhen exploded into a city of skyscrapers. In the countryside, families got their own land back, harvests jumped, and famine finally became history. To slow a population boom, China brought in the one-child policy with huge and lasting side effects. But reform raised a dangerous question. If the economy is free, why not the people? In 1989, students packed Tiananmen Square, demanding democracy. The party sent in the tanks. The world watched a single man block a whole column of tanks. The message was clear. Economic freedom, yes. Political freedom, no. After that stumble, Deng doubled down. In 1992, he toured the South and demanded faster, bolder growth. A quiet bargain was struck. The party delivers prosperity, and in return, the people don't challenge its power. Markets, not the state, would now set prices, and private business took off.
The results
Were staggering. In 1990, 80% of Chinese lived in extreme poverty. Within a generation, it fell to almost zero. Hundreds of millions of people climbed out of poverty, one of the greatest economic miracles ever recorded. In 1997, Britain handed Hong Kong back. The Century of Humiliation was finally closed. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization and became the workshop of the world, cheaper and faster than anyone. In 2008, it dazzled the planet with the Beijing Olympics. By 2009, it was the second largest economy on Earth. But the miracle came with a price: choking pollution, deep inequality, mass surveillance, and a great firewall sealing off the internet. The West had bet that getting rich would make China more like us. It didn't. The party still rules almost unopposed. In 2012, a new strongman took the wheel, Xi Jinping, pushing China to act like a great power once again. A century after the last emperor fell, the Middle Kingdom had taken back its place at the center of the world. So next time you flip over your phone and read "Made in China," remember, that little label is the end of a 200-year comeback. If this made the story click for you, smash that like, share it with a friend, and subscribe to Stickman Explains. See you in the next one.